Okay, Matt, we're ready. Good afternoon. It's 4 p.m. and I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Airport Master Plan Steering Group for the City of Lake City. One administrative announcement, the chairman, Councilman Jake Hill, is not with us today due to a conflict in another official meeting. So I will be chairing the meeting in his behalf. I hereby call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mr. Beal?
Here.
Mr. Coley?
Mr. Coley, I believe, is not going to be with us this evening.
He was going to try and do Zoom, but may not be on.
Okay. Mr. Harwell? Mr. Halesko? Ms. Iglesias Hamon? Mr. Johnson?
I'm here.
Mr. Kraus?
Mr. Krause had a conflict with the county meeting.
Ms. Small?
I'm here.
Mr. McKee?
Here.
Ms. Stroud?
Here.
Mr. Voss?
Here.
Mr. Wente?
He couldn't make it as well.
Ms. Whitney? Mr. Williams?
Here.
Mr. Hill? Mr. Coberline?
Here.
Okay, in your package, you have the minutes from the last meeting of October 28th, 2021. I'll give you a moment to look over those. The chair will open the floor for a motion. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion, correction, additions, or deletions? All those in favor of approval of the minutes of October 28th, 2021 signify by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We'll now move for approval of the agenda. You have the agenda in front of you. The chair will open the floor for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any question or discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the agenda as written signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is approved. Persons wishing to address committee. Citizens are encouraged to participate in City of Lake City meetings. The City of Lake City encourages civility and public discourse and requests that speakers direct their comments to the chair. Those attendees wishing to share a document or comments in writing for inclusion into the public record must email the item to submissions@lakecityflorida.com no later than noon of the day of the meeting. Citizens may also provide input to individual council members via office visits, phone calls, letters, and email that will become public record. Do we have anyone from the public who wishes to address the committee? We'll now move on to old business. At this time, we'll have a PowerPoint presentation on the airport master plan update. I will turn it over to Chris Johnson. Chris, it's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Let me share my screen here. Okay, everybody, please let me know when you see my screen and I'll get started. Okay, can everybody see my screen here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, I'm gonna get started. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. As Mr. Williams has said, my name is Chris Johnson. I am the lead planner and project manager for the airport master plan effort for Lake City Gateway Airport. We're going to briefly go over the agenda and then we're going to get into the tasks at hand. So as always, we're going to go over our project process and approach. We're going to have just another refresher on the airport facilities. We're going to go over the airport development areas as well as the list of facility requirements that we'll be discussing today. And then we're going to go over how we are looking and assessing each alternative. And then we're going to go into each of the alternatives. And then we will open up for discussion where we'll be asking for input, any recommendations that you all have. And then we will be discussing next steps. So as I said with the previous presentation, this is essentially the project process that we are following here. We've already had 4 meetings. Right now we're on meeting number 5. We're calling it our development plan meeting. We'll be discussing the development alternatives, but so far we've had our first meeting, which was our project initiation. We've had our meeting number 2, which was our SWOT analysis, as well as our goal setting and visioning meeting. This was our first airport master plan steering group meeting. We've had meetings with airport management, and the big milestone for meeting number 3 was establishing the airport forecast and getting that approved by the FAA and FDOT. Our previous meeting, we discussed the airport design standards and facility requirements, which plays a major part in the meeting today. And then looking forward, we're going to be going into the phasing and implementation, further assessing the alternatives that we'll be discussing today. And then we're going into the final review and approval phase with the various agencies, that's the FAA and FDOT, as well as getting the final resolution of approval from the city. Okay, so as mentioned in the previous presentation, Lake City Gateway Airport has 2 runways, runway 1028, runway 523. They have 7 taxiways, and they have 2 main tenants, which are the U.S. Forestry Service, and the MRO is HACO. At the start of this master plan also, we separated the airport up into different regions, and we're going to be discussing those regions tonight as we're talking about different development alternatives that can occur at this airport. So I'm going to zoom in here, and we're going to go over each individual one. We're going to start with the airport operating area, which is mainly the runways, as well as the taxiways. And then we have our terminal FBO area. Moving to the west part of the airport, we have our air tanker base area. This is where the U.S. Forestry Service is. Moving over to the east part of our airport, we have the MRO development area, which is where HACO is. And then we have the various airfield facility expansion areas. And these are the areas that we're looking at specifically for airport expansion. And we have airport expansion area A, B, C, D, E, and F. So we're going to be talking about some of the development alternatives that the airport needs in some of these airport expansion areas. But, you know, the good thing is this airport has a lot of room for growth and development. So we will open it up to get any comments from any of you all, just if there's anything that we may have not thought of, or if you guys have any fresh ideas, we would definitely love to hear that so we can put that in front of the airport management and the city for their consideration. So with each of the alternatives that we're looking at, we had to first go back to our facility requirements and determine which of the facility requirements would require an alternative to be put on the airport layout plan, because a lot of the facility requirements that we identified in the previous presentation, some of those facility requirements can be addressed with general maintenance and repair at the airport, as well as be addressed in future projects outside of what we're identifying here in the master plan. So specifically looking at the runways and taxiways, we'll be looking at addressing RSA and RPZ deficiencies, potential runway extensions, looking at developing taxiways to decrease back taxi operations on runways, looking at upgrading airfield facilities, specifically navigational aid equipment, as well as adding additional hangar units that are needed to address current demands and as well as future demand. And then also looking at a potential expansion to the terminal specifically to address the need during peak hour times. So with each alternative, we are first looking at different grading criteria. So these criteria are operational, development costs, airfield strategic, and we're mainly asking the questions which are in bold here, where starting with operational, we're asking the question, does this alternative improve the physical layout and operation of the airport? For the development costs, we're going high level. We're not going into the nitty gritty costs here. We're more so looking at, would this alternative cost more based on different factors, such as construction costs? Would it require more costs for construction for more material? Would land need to be acquired as a part of the development costs, as well as demolition of pavement or existing facilities? So those are just examples of development costs. And then for the airfield strategic, we're asking the question, how well does this alternative meet the existing and long-term needs of the airport and the sponsor? So with each of these grading criteria, we are applying a rating of 1 through 5 to each one, where 1 is alternative provides minimal benefit, or from a cost standpoint, it would be more costly for whatever reason, the construction specifically. Or 5 is alternative provides the most benefit, or in this case, the least amount of cost. So before we continue on to the individual alternatives, I just want to stop here and see if anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, we will move on. So with all of our alternative analysis, we like to start with the base, and we call our base the do nothing alternative or do nothing option. And what that is the airport will remain in its existing state. There will be no additional hangars being built, no additional facilities being built, no runway projects, no taxiway projects. So the only benefit to this alternative is there will be really no development costs outside of just the cost needed for rehabilitating the existing airport. But with that being said, the impacts will be the runway, for instance, would not be extended to accommodate future demand. There will be no additional hangar units built, which would not satisfy the current hangar waiting list. So that's the existing demand as well as future demand. And then taxiway geometry deficiencies that were identified by the FAA would not be addressed. So there will still be deficiencies on this airfield. So for that reason, this alternative will have the lowest score. So going into some alternatives now, moving away from the do nothing, we will start with the runway 28. So as part of our facility requirements, we looked at the existing and future critical aircraft that we identified in the previous part of this master plan. And from our alternative analysis, we identified that the future critical aircraft, which we were saying was a Boeing 767-400, would require additional runway length in 8,003 feet. So what this alternative is showing is a potential runway extension of 500 feet. And the benefit here is it will be able to accommodate both existing and future demand from both the existing and future critical aircraft. The impacts, however, would be the costs associated with construction of new airfield pavement, which is going to be generally all costs that are associated with building new airfield pavement, as well as the relocation of the fence off of the 28 end that is adjacent to Southeast Timberwolf Avenue. And then the environmental impacts that are associated with all construction costs. However, the main thing here is it will be very high for the airfield strategic as well as the operational, because it will add benefit to the airport for future operations to allow larger aircraft to operate at this airport. Moving on to the RPZs. As I mentioned in the previous presentation, as long as this runway is not being touched in any way, meaning the approach minimums are not upgraded, as well as no construction on this runway, the existing non-compatible land uses within the RPZ there will be no action needed besides continued coordination with the property owners, the FAA and FDOT. However, just to do our due diligence, we still wanted to look at alternatives should we need to address this. And these alternatives were the first option, which is just acquiring the land within the RPZs so we could control the development to ensure that the development is compatible with the RPZ requirements. So that's the first alternative. The second alternative will be to displace the thresholds. And in doing that, we will lose a significant amount of runway length. So if we would have to do any alternative for the RPZs, specifically based off of losing runway length, option one would be the better option. Looking at the RSA, on the other hand, we would need to do an immediate alternative to address the RSA issues.
Chris, can I
Yes.
interject? Just
Yes.
to describe what an RPZ is, runway protection.
Oh, yes, yes.
I just want
go ahead.
that everybody knows what that is.
Yes, okay, so let me go back. So the runway protection zone is an area that is set up to protect people, more specifically occupants who are in a still position, either in a building or in a parked car. This is to protect people off of the ends of the runway. The RSA, or runway safety area, on the other hand, is set up to protect the aircraft and occupants on the aircraft. So those are the differences between the runway protection zone, or RPZ, and the runway safety area, or RSA.
Thank you.
So thank you for that question. Does anybody have any more questions on these RPZs or RSAs?
Yeah, Chris, I'm at the college. So tell me the impact, the RPZ, are you adding any additional land to the airport, or are you using existing land, and just how does that work?
Well, if we would extend the runway, let's say off of the 28 end, we would look to acquire additional land within the RSA. But extending the runway off the 28 end, we don't anticipate relocating any existing facility. Really, it's the land is pretty much open there. So it's more so just trying to get the land within the RPZ to just ensure that nobody builds a building or a golf course or a road through the RPZ.
Does that include the road that's there, that exists there now?
It does. It does include the road that's existing. However, if there's not any significant project done to the runway, then having an existing road going through an existing RPZ is not an issue. We just, as I said, we would just have to make sure that there's coordination between FDOT and the airport. But this is something that's typical at a lot of general aviation airports, and also airports in general, just because the RPZ requirements have changed over time. So they've added more non-compatible land uses that aren't supposed to be within the RPZ. Okay, is there any more questions before I continue? Okay. So looking at the RSA, we identified a fence as well as a road that cut through the RSA off of both the runway 10 and 28 ends. So two options that we looked at to address this. The first option being declaring the distance. And what this is basically saying is we are saying that distances would be declared to decrease the amount of length that is available for takeoff operations, stop distance operations, that is when an aircraft has to slam on its brakes for any reason at all to abort a takeoff, as well as the landing distance available for landing operations. So that's the first option that we were looking at. The second option that we were looking at was applying what is called the Engineering Materials Arrestor Systems, or EMAS. This essentially is set up for aircrafts to if they run off the end of a runway, they'll run off onto this EMAS system, and it will essentially slow their aircraft down enough to stop them from rolling off and hitting, potentially hitting any occupants on the road, or hitting the fence, or any obstacle that is within the RSA. So the thing about these two options is option one would grade higher because the cost to implement an EMAS system is greater. It's pretty significant to do. However, operationally speaking, the EMAS system would be better for the airport because they would not lose runway distances through declared distances. So we're just showing these two options. Option one, as I said, would get a grade of 13. Option two would get a grade of 12. However, option two may be the better option just for the simple fact of the airport maintaining their runway length. Okay, so let's move into taxiways. Starting with Taxiway Charlie, as I mentioned in the previous presentation, the FAA identified a geometry issue where a taxiway connector was not connecting perpendicularly to a runway. In this case, Taxiway Charlie, which we're showing here in red, connecting at an angle, as well as presenting a direct connection from the terminal area into the runway, where an aircraft can essentially get onto the runway without making a stop or making a jog. So what this alternative is doing is we are taking a taxiway connector and we're putting it perpendicular to runway 1028 from taxiway Alpha. And we're also shifting it approximately 100 feet in order to ensure that aircraft who are operating within the terminal area onto taxiway Alpha are making a turn to get onto taxiway, to get onto runway 1028. So we have had numerous conversations with airport management and looked at different alternatives. And this was the alternative that was most preferred to address this issue that the FAA identified. Taxiway Bravo 1, in our previous presentation, we spoke about an issue of taxiway, or more specifically, an entrance or exit taxiway not connecting to the end of the runway, in this case, runway 5. So what this alternative is showing is producing some kind of jog off of taxiway Bravo 1, where aircraft would essentially go at an angle and then connect perpendicularly to runway 5. That way, aircraft will not be able to back taxi as they currently do off of Bravo 1. And that in turn will increase the safety of aircraft users on runway 523. Going into taxiway Bravo, we had more than one option here. Option one, we were looking at extending the current taxiway Bravo all the way to the end of runway 28 to add a double parallel taxiway to runway 1028. And the good thing about this option is it provides access to the people operating in the HACO area directly into runway 28. because right now, in order for people in this area to get to the runway 28 end, they would have to back taxi on runway 523. Entering a runway environment to taxi presents a dangerous opportunity for something bad to happen. And then they would taxi up to taxiway Alpha to get on 28, or they would back taxi on runway 1028. So this option provides them access to runway 28. Option 2 just provides a taxiway connector from the MRO area directly to runway 28. And essentially, anyone else on the west portion of the airport can still access runway 1028 using taxiway Alpha. So these were the two options that we looked at. Option 1, for the fact that the development costs were lower and operationally it would work better to have a double parallel taxiway. Option 1, for that reason, we said ranked higher. Looking at runway 523, currently there is not a taxiway system that services runway 523. So right now, aircraft users that use runway 523 back taxi on the runway, and then they take off and they perform their operations. So we looked at various options for this runway as well, starting with option 1. This is a full parallel taxiway crossing runway 1028 and taxiway Alpha, and then connecting to runway 23. Option 2 is providing a taxiway connector from taxiway Alpha and then connecting to runway 28, as well as using Bravo 1, which is the existing taxiway, or in this arrangement, the proposed connection to the runway 5 end to access runway 5. Option 3, using the current Alpha 1 taxiway and then providing a connector off of taxiway Alpha 1 to runway 23. So in each of these alternatives, we assessed the cost. We also assessed the airfield strategic as well as the operational. And based off of those grading criteria, option 2 ranked a little higher. However, honestly, any one of these options would work and would also help taxi operations be safer for using runway 523. Okay, moving into the airfield facilities. In the previous meeting, we discussed instrument approach procedures and visual approach procedures, whereas visual approach procedures is where a pilot during landing operations can see the runway, and this is a clear day. Whereas instrument approach procedures is where there's inclement weather and a pilot will rely on equipment in his or her cockpit to land on a runway. So right now, this airport has a non-precision instrument approach procedure where that provides course guidance, meaning the equipment will tell the pilot where they are in terms of being either too far left or too far right of a runway. And then there is another instrument approach procedure, and that's called precision instrument approach procedure, where a pilot will be able to use equipment to tell them either if they're too left or too right from a runway, or also if they're too high or too low. So it provides both vertical and course guidance. So in order to establish precision instrument approach procedure at this airport off of runway 1028, additional facilities would need to be built. More specifically, the instrument landing facilities where an additional localizer would need to be built, as well as a glide slope antenna, as well as the associated shelter that goes with the glide slope antenna. The main thing with this alternative, however, is it will require a larger RPZ. So as you see, our RPZ still goes over Southeast Timberwolf Avenue, but because we would be extending the runway essentially, as well as upgrading the instrument approach procedures, then at that point, we would have to look into an alternative for Southeast Timberwolf Avenue, as well as look into additional land to be acquired. So what we are proposing here is keeping most of Southeast Timberwolf Avenue, and then this part right here that jogs down into a curve, it will be relocated here where where people could use US 90 and essentially connect down to a relocated portion of Timberwolf Avenue, and then still connect into the southern portion of Timberwolf Avenue.
Chris,
Moving on.
I've got a question.
Yes, yes, sir.
Can you explain how the Airfield Strategic got a 5? I mean, what was this, an objective or subjective when you decided for Airfield Strategic to be 5?
Yes, yes. So this is subjective. I will say that it got a 5 because upgrading upgrading the approach to a precision instrument approach would benefit the airport by providing just that added measure during inclement weather. This also would mean that pilots could land during weather where cloud visibility would be even worse, where it could be a half-mile visibility or 250-foot cloud cover from the ground to the sky. So it got a 5 for Airfield Strategic because it would better improve the approach procedures at the airport.
Okay, Chris, I have one more question. What do they do?
Yes, sir.
What do they do when the weather's bad? We just don't land at this airport or take off at this airport?
Oh, no. So when the weather is bad, the non-precision instrument approach procedure, will still allow pilots to land at this airport. It's just, as I said, a precision instrument approach would just provide that extra added piece for the pilot to tell them if they're either too high or too low during their landing operation. So yes, pilots still land at this airport during inclement weather.
It allows a lower ceiling and visibility requirement for the order to land with precision.
So it will be a half-mile visibility, meaning a pilot will be able to see a half-mile in front of them, and everything after that, their equipment would be able to tell them, where they are in relation to the runway, and then it's up to 250 feet from the ground to the cloud cover. So anything above 250 feet, the pilot will be able to use his or her equipment to tell them where the runway is. These are great questions. Are there any more questions? Okay, I'm gonna move on. So moving into the air tanker base area, there is an existing project with the U.S. Forestry Service where the apron area is being upgraded to accommodate larger as well as heavier aircraft, more specifically the DC-10. So what this alternative is showing is adding additional pavement here for additional parking operations where filling in these, currently we have grass islands right here and right here. So this alternative is recommending filling these in. And with that added extra pavement, we would have to look into infrastructure for stormwater operations. So this would add in additional drainage infrastructure, as well as upgrading the pavement to accommodate the heavier aircraft, as I mentioned. So this is the preferred alternative that was discussed with airport management, and this will also be included with this airport layout plan and master plan. Moving into the expansion areas A and B, specifically the hangars. Our facility requirements stated that we needed at least at a minimum 12 additional T-hanger units, 8 additional corporate hangar units, and 1 additional box hangar. So what we wanted to do is first start off and see if we could accommodate, if this airport could accommodate those needs based off the master plan, as well as the existing hangar waiting list. And the answer was yes. So at that point, we wanted to know how many additional hangars could we build. So this is the arrangement that you see here, where we're looking at adding additional hangars within the terminal FBO area, as well as expansion areas A and expansion areas B. And with that, also improving the circulation within the terminal area and within the boundaries of the airport property boundary south of US 90 without adding additional curb cuts, which was something that came out of conversations with FDOT, just trying to minimize the amount of curb cuts coming into the airport. And then our other expansion within the terminal FBO area was potentially expanding the terminal. Now, I must mention that this is, we're recommending this only if demand warrants it. Based off of our forecast and our analysis from the forecast during peak time hours, it was shown that additional space is needed on the public side of the terminal to accommodate pilots and passengers. So this is what we're showing with this alternative. We're estimating approximately 3,000 square feet of additional terminal space is needed. Okay, so I've discussed all the alternatives that we identified that we need based off of the facility requirements. And at a very minimum, that's where we always start with the alternative process. But as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, this airport has a lot of open land available for development. So here's where I'm going to call on you guys and, please provide any ideas, anything that you felt that we didn't mention here today, any alternative that you felt that we left out, please provide that. As you see, we've only looked at really 2 areas. We looked at, or actually 3 areas to be more specific. We looked at the terminal FBO area. We also looked at the airfield expansion area, and then part of the airfield expansion area Bravo. But we have Charlie, we have Delta, we have Echo, we have parts of the MRO development area, and we also have Foxtrot, is what we're saying here. So I'm just going to open it up. Please, any ideas, any comments that you guys have, we welcome them. What we're going to do is we're going to write them down and we're going to discuss them with airport management, and it will be for airport management and the city's consideration. So with that, I just want to open it up to anybody. Does anybody have any ideas or any development thoughts that can occur at this airport besides what I mentioned today? And I must mention here, each of these areas, some of these areas will be more appropriate for airfield, aeronautical development, or non-aeronautical development. So this also includes any non-aeronautical development idea that you guys have. So again, I'm opening up the floor here. Sky's the limits on the ideas.
Anyone?
Off the top of my head.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
No, he can't.
Okay. Okay.
We do have interest in more corporate hangars. There was a private individual that came forward and wanted to not only build one, but also multiple about a half a dozen of the, not necessarily as large as the corporate hangars that we have, but along the sides of hangars D, or maybe perhaps a little bit larger.
Chris, and you do this
Okay.
you've got MRO expansion over by where HACO is. Were you considering expansion of HACO facilities, or would they be additional MRO? Would there be additional MRO opportunities with another company?
So you're absolutely right. It could be either or. This airport definitely has room for an additional MRO operation. So with that being said, like as I said, we have all this room available. Where would you recommend if a second MRO came here? Where would you recommend it be located? And there's no wrong answers.
Well, I mean, I've only been to Lakeland to see their setup, and they've got some smaller facilities. Again, I'm not sure. I'm not an engineer.
Okay.
But, I'm looking at 30 acres in Area C. I'm trying to figure what that would look like. What type of aircraft facility that could be.
Right.
But you also said that this could be non-aviation.
Yes.
So basically anything could locate.
As long as it's not adjacent to a runway, a major runway, then yes, like for instance, Area C could be either aeronautical or non-aeronautical. Area D, it just would make more sense for this to be aeronautical because it's located adjacent to 2 runways. So does anybody, on that note, does anybody have any ideas of types of non-aeronautical development that could operate at this airport that would be beneficial? And it doesn't, we don't necessarily need to determine where some of this stuff can go. We can just talk about ideas for this airport.
Anyone?
Future, it would be nice to have hotels. But right now, there's not enough traffic that would bring, I think, a full hotel bed count.
And that's always been our concern, being that on that side of town, when you have a performer that is doing a show at your school, and you have to drive all the way into to I-75 for the hotel.
So if you had a hotel there, it could service both the airport and the college.
Well, and it also could serve HACO, because I'm sure their pilots have to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that there are other corporate entities that would use a facility while they're in town looking at their facility.
It may be more feasible than you think.
Most definitely.
Okay. Anyone have anything else, Chris? Want to move to steps?
Yeah. So I'll say if anybody else has any more ideas, please feel free to email me or reach out to Ms. Florence Straw, and we would definitely put those under consideration. I understand that I put you guys here on the spot, so we're definitely open to any ideas that you guys have, and I just want to put that out there. We welcome your ideas. So with that, I'm just going to open this up to just general discussion, recommendations, any comments that you guys have, besides the questions that you guys posed earlier.
This is your first meeting.
Well, this is Mike Williams. I just want to say that all this is well thought out and moving forward well. We always want to consider our neighbors, adjoining property owners and stakeholders and everything that we do so that we maintain a good synergy with them. So like with the college, who else do we have over close to us?
And we also want to consider HACO.
Yeah, HACO is our MRO facility currently. We want to make sure that we consider any other neighbors, the forestry and their portion over there. And then anything, because we have property owners over behind the airfield as well.
The industrial park.
That's right, the industrial park property over there. So we want to always be cognizant of the fact that whatever we do, while it may be good for the airport, we want to make sure that it doesn't have a negative impact on our neighbors and stakeholders, and that if there is something that we need to do, that we need to make them aware of it and work with them to reach some sort of appropriate resolution.
Got it.
Chris, I got a question. I noticed that in the agenda that, or in your presentation, there was a working paper. I've not seen any working papers. Is that something that you put together after our sessions, or how does that work?
Yeah. Yeah, we typically put those together after the session. Actually, we have working papers that are currently in progress. And after today's meeting, we were going to wrap up working paper number 2. However, we do have working paper number 1. If anybody would like to see a copy of that, please email me and I can send you a copy. So as soon as working papers number 2 is complete, we will send that to the FA and FDOT for their review. But we also will share it with everybody here on the steering group if they're interested.
I guess, and I hate to be such a pain, but
No, it's okay.
are we looking at FAA funding for any of the things we do here?
Yeah, so the way it goes is in order for an airport to be eligible for funding participation by the FAA or FDOT, we will have to show that particular project on the AOP. That doesn't necessarily mean that, how I have each of the hangars laid out and that I presented to you guys today, that doesn't mean that those hangars need to be laid out in those arrangements. We just will have to say if 12 additional T-hangar units are needed at this airport, that will have to be shown the AOP in order for the airport to be considered for funding. So very long way of answering your question. Sorry, go ahead.
And for the benefit of everybody, an ALP, airport
It's an
layout
airport.
plan. And you
Got
can
it.
go ahead and explain that it's part of the master plan. Go ahead and explain what that ALP is.
Yes. So the airport layout plan essentially is a drawing document that tells the story of the airport. It shows the airport in its existing conditions, and then it shows the airport potentially where the airport can be 5, 10, or 20 years into the future. And then it goes into some of the technical analysis. In the previous presentation, we spoke about airspace analysis, airspace above the airport, around the runways, and off the ends of the runways. So there's obstruction analysis that will be included within the airport layout plans package, and then also a land use map showing land uses adjacent to the airport, as well as Exhibit A airport property inventory map, which shows the inventory of all the properties that the airport owns. So it's, as I said, if we have the master plan that tells the story of the airport, as well as where the airport could be 5, 10, 20 years in the future, the ALP complements the master plan document as a visual document that tells the story visually. So that was a great question. Thank you, Florence. Okay, is there any more questions or general comments, recommendations?
One last one.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at the next steps, and you've got a next meeting scheduled for March or April of next year.
Yes.
Now, is that where we'll be presented with the draft master plan document?
Yes, we will have, so we're going to be going over the implementation plan. Essentially, that's looking at some of the potential projects that we talked about today and how those would work with the current 5-year CIP. And then some of the other projects identified for longer in the planning period, that's years 6 through 20, where those projects will be. So we will be looking at the implementation plan, and that will be essentially its own working paper. We also would like to show a completed AOP. So yes, in that presentation, we would have a draft of the AOP and potentially a full document draft of the master plan, or working paper 3, where we will be discussing the implementation plan. And as I said before, if anybody wants to see working papers 1 or 2, just please let me know, and I have no problem sharing that with you guys. And then also just continuing on this slide, points 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's looking out further. As I said, we'll be discussing implementation plan, but then after that meeting, then we will be getting into finalizing this AOP and master plan effort with going through the review first with the airport management in the city, and then sending the documents off to the FAA and FDOT for their review. And then they're going to go through a different coordination with all their divisions within the FAA. And then at that point, once those edits are addressed, then it will be the finalization of the master plan and airport layout plan, or AOP document, where we will be seeking local approval as well as approval from the FAA and also FDOT. So with that being said, we're nearing the end of this master plan. So if anybody else has any questions, about anything that we've done, or the process, or how the rest of this master plan is going to look, as I said, please feel free to contact me. You can send me an email. You can contact the airport if you feel more comfortable contacting them. But we're just here to educate everybody about the airport, as well as gather any ideas that you guys have. Okay, so with that, we're projecting that our next meeting will be, we said March or April 2022. We can just say April of 2022. Do you guys want to establish a date now, or would you guys rather establish a date at a later time?
I think we can leave it at April, and Florence
Okay.
can check meeting schedules and then get with you and then send out a meeting invite for a later date in April.
Right, and I just want to make sure that we make it a date where it's not in conflict of the county's meeting. And unfortunately, that we'll make sure that we keep that in consideration and avoid that.
Okay, that works for us.
All right, Chris, so does that finish your part of the presentation?
Yep, that finishes my part of the presentation. I will stop sharing my screen. Okay, I'll hand it right over to you, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to just say that we appreciate everybody's participation. Thank you for coming. I know it's getting close to the holidays. Unfortunately, we had a few people who couldn't be here because of scheduling conflicts, but for those of you who could make the time to come, we greatly appreciate that. Is there anything else from anyone, any other comments related to anything with the Airport Steering Committee? Okay, with that, the floor will open and we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
We have a motion to adjourn. We have a second. Have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.